Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. I have with me here Phillip C. Quaintrell, who is an absolute megastar. Uh, Phil, would you like to introduce yourself and maybe give us a random fun fact about yourself?
Hello, my name is Phillip C. Quaintrell. Random fun fact about myself. I have never paid for a haircut in my life.
Okay. You know someone in the family that can do
Mother,
it?
she's been a
I think we
hairdresser.
all, yeah, that's lucky. I think we all had some home haircuts during COVID, right? Um,
Yeah, that
my
was hard.
girlfriend, yeah, my girlfriend did it twice. She did a good job, but she was a bit nervous, slightly shaky with this.
Just went straight for the clippers. We sort of did the whole like, oh, cut it there, and in the end, it was just.
It's the easiest way to do it. Not for me though. I hate the Clippers. So, would you like to tell us about a certain series you have written, Echo Saga?
Uh,
It's done so well. Can you recall the moment where you had the first burst of inspiration for it all those years ago?
I was on a weekend away with some friends in a really nice cottage in the English countryside, and I'm an introvert by nature, so I used to get up in the mornings before everyone else, and I'd come downstairs and put some music in, and I had a notepad, and I was partway through writing a sci-fi series at the time, and I had thought I would love to do something that was fantasy style, but when you're writing in a different genre, you don't think you can do anything else. And I was listening to Run Boy Run by Woodkid, and I don't know where it came from. I was just listening to it, and I suddenly just had this like image of um, who I now know is Asher, one of the main characters in the Echo Saga. I just had a vision of him on a horse, and he was being chased, but he was also chasing. He was. I just immediately had this character in my head that was stuck between running away and running towards, and that really intrigued me as to what he was doing. And I just kind of followed the rabbit hole, and I think I ended that weekend with maybe almost a full notepad of information on Verda, the world, and various characters and history, and it was like a book in
Wow.
itself.
It just all came out really fast, just kind of all from that one idea, just really fast. It's really cool. Took me ages to build up some of the lore. Did you find you focused very much on Asher first and then everything else came, or did it all just sort of come just all at once? I mean, what?
I I definitely had like that burst of inspiration for Asher, but then I quickly put him aside to try and think like what world did he live in, and so then I probably filled most of the pages on history and places and just like world building, and then went back and started doing some heavy character profiles for him and other characters. Um, if you look in that note now, it's just full of question marks.
Right, yeah. But that's how you do it, right? You have to keep asking yourself questions. I uh, I try to get other people to ask me questions, really obvious, like almost 5-year-old questions about the book, about the world, because that triggers me to have to think about it harder in some ways.
Yeah, yeah,
Until someone really asks you something obvious, you kind of skim over it.
yeah. I often just try and tell myself, "Oh, I'll figure that out when I get there," and that happens a lot. But you do go into it feeling a lot more confident, don't you, when someone's grilled you on something and you actually have to figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I almost rely on it now in some ways. I almost rely on having people to sound bored off of and have them ask really. And when I get really stuck, often I just come to them and I explain why I'm stuck, and they won't provide the solution per se, but they will just ask me something so brain dead, like, "Why can't this just happen?" And then and I think, "Actually, why can't that just happen?" Or, like, I'm overthinking it so much. I'm sure you've had those situations too, and someone just cuts right through it because 'cause they're not involved, and they just say, "But why don't you just do that instead?" So I really need that feedback now in some ways.
That he will often like the last comment I read made me laugh. I had been speeding through a scene to get to this like action bit that I've been thinking about for a while, and his comment was, Asher can be a bit stupid sometimes, can't he? Because of like how I'd written him, like he hadn't done something that was very like
Okay.
assassin ranger esque,
Yeah.
and I thought to myself, really, what he's saying there is that I can be a bit stupid sometimes because I'm the one writing him.
Oh yeah. Well, then do you also do they describe the evil characters as you can be a bit evil too? Like, how far do they take that?
Yeah, they wonder if there's an evil side to me.
Hmm. So, for those who will be listening later that don't know what the Echo Saga is, there will be about two of those people in the world at this point. But do you want to give a quick pitch about Echoes for those who maybe don't know it?
Quick pitch. Now, come on, you know, as an author, you can't give a quick pitch about the story you write. I mean, I know you're supposed to be able to, but I've never been able to. Writing the blurb, like a few paragraphs, is harder than writing the entire book.
Yeah, it actually is.
A
Yeah.
quick pitch. It's 9 books. It's a sprawling saga. Um, every 3 books, I would say things evolve. The story, the time jumps a bit, so it's more digestible, and it's as epic as the description goes. It fits for the genre. It is very sprawling. It's huge world. It's big stakes. It's got your elves, and it's got dwarves and humans and rangers and orcs and dragons and riders, and it's got all the things that you would want out of an epic fantasy series.
All the trimmings.
Yes, yeah, with
Yeah.
an original twist on everything.
Yeah, a little modern twist. I like that. I like just having the classics, but a little twist, a little something that makes them fresh. That's
Because I
very
mean,
much what I've been doing.
yeah, it's don't you? It's hard to make something completely brand new for the genre. Um, Tolkien, the godfather of fantasy, he laid that foundation, and then others have come in and laid more. And I think there's something enjoyable and comfortable in the familiar. People want to be able to pick up a book and be quickly absorbed into it because things feel familiar. They know what that means, what that looks like in their head. And then you, as the new author, can come in and sort of say, you know, this is my vision of it. So you have an idea, but actually, this is what we're talking about. And I quite like doing that.
Yeah, it's on Sanderson's lectures, he often talks about the familiar and the strange, where you want a kind of blend up of things that people recognize to some extent, and then there's a little bit of strange in there. But if it's all too familiar, it can feel kind of boring. If it's all too strange, it can feel very hard to get into. You want a little blend of both, you know. So a lot of people have a lot of dragons in their books, but you want to figure out how to make them feel unique to you, which isn't
Yours
easy.
is pretty cool. You've got blindfold on your dragon.
I got blindfolded my dragon. Yeah, it confuses some people. They're like, why have you blindfolded them? I'm like, because he's blind. Like, these are like Facebook ad comments, you know. I'm like, okay, of all the things to pick out, fair enough.
People
It does
thinking
add
that
that little thing though,
oh,
because the cover actually it's a good point because the cover looks like a few people have said this. They're like the cover could be really generic, but the blindfold makes it immediately different and intriguing. You know, it's gorgeous art and everything, and the colors are perfect, but just that a boy and a dragon, we've sort of seen that. A lot of people might pass it by, but just that little bit of the blindfold, you think there is something different here. Just makes you stop
yeah.
and think
When
about it.
we first started talking, I said to you that I'd never seen that image before,
Yeah.
and just because I've never seen it before in a genre that's saturated, it was refreshing, and it pulled my attention in immediately to look at it. The uh, the writing's not half bad either.
Yeah. Oh, you slide up. Right. But, but speaking about writing then, okay, so when you were writing this massive epic, 9 books, which I can't even get my head around, I've only put out 6 books, never mind 9 books in one series, right? What was the most challenging thing in writing those 9 books?
Not knowing where it was going, that was easily the most
Yeah.
challenging thing. I didn't have an end. I can't tell you how, but I knew there were 9 books in the series. I think it's because I knew I had, by the time I'd finished the first 3 books, I knew I had a story or 2 stories really that would fill 6 more books and would fit into the thread of the saga. So I knew that I could do a 4, 5, and 6, and then there'd be a 7, 8, 9, and they'd each have
Yeah.
like their own story with a connection. But I didn't know what the end was. In fact, I released the last book in May, and I changed the ending as close as the January to what I had in mind. I'd sort of had this
Uh,
end for a few months, and then I realized it was completely different. But I mean, that's the joy of writing organically. Not planning ahead and letting the story unfold and tell itself. That's the joy in as the author, is not knowing yourself exactly where it's going, because it's like an adventure for you then as well.
so you're very much organic writer, a gardener. What other terms do we have for that? A pantser, or do you plan at all, or is it all just you just see what happens?
I often have like I call it like beats in my head. Like scenes that
Yeah,
you think of that are like, oh, that's kind of cool. I'd like to write that, and oh, that'd be
yeah,
really
for sure.
interesting. Um, they don't always happen though. I often sort of envision them, and then because you kind of hand over the story to the characters, it can go a completely different direction. And the hard thing can be letting go of those ideas that you had because it doesn't fit anymore. Um, but
Yeah,
that's
yeah. I
for
think
me.
talking about it as beats is quite cool.
That's kind of how I've often seen it. Is I'm sometimes I'm a few beats ahead. Sometimes I've got like a massive gap, and there's like I can see a couple of beats at the end. Um, but more often than not, I just kind of find a starting point and go from there.
Yeah, I think I do that to some extent. I think I've tried to plan more as I've gone on because I know that I always hit certain points in the story, and then I feel like I need to know more about what's coming. So then I plan so much as I go anyway that I'm trying to do a lot more planning up front, and hopefully that will make the writing smoother. But who knows? I can be very stop and start. About every 40,000 words, I have to stop and take a lay of the land, almost do a survey of what's coming up, and plan it out again, and constantly going
I
back
have
through it.
though,
It's not very efficient, but it seems to be how I get it done.
who never had though one of those um, like fist pump moments where a twist or a revelation happens that you kind of didn't see until that exact moment.
I must have, but I can't remember off the top of my head. Mostly, I think usually what happens is if they do come, uh, they happen in the sort of first drafting, and then I usually have to go back and obviously edit in the necessary steps to make it work, to foreshadow and stuff. And so often that requires going back to the sort of the outline and figuring out where I might slot it in and slot up the foreshadowing, the setup. So yeah, those moments absolutely do occur, but it kind of immediately requires some planning to make work. So I kind of it does bounce back and forth. I don't think I've ever had a moment where it's totally out of the blue and it completely works without anything else needing to shift to make it work. At least not that I can remember. Um, Often the real fist bump moments for me are when I have had some planning and I've worked towards a certain scene that I've planned and I actually feel like I've nailed it. That's when it works for me. Like, because oftentimes I think I'm not living up to the idea that's, the perfect idea in my head. I'm not getting it out on the page correctly, but occasionally I do feel like I've got it out correctly, and those are the real high points for me.
It scares me thinking about moving on to the next series because I didn't plan any of the twists or revelations or like shocking moments in the Echo saga. They just sort of happened, and every time they happened, I was like, "Yes, that's amazing! That's so good!" Like almost just like a reader kind of thing, just experiencing it for the first time. But then it scares me thinking about future books, because then you go into like the next series and you're thinking, am I going to have like the same level of revelations and twists? Do I need to orchestrate twists this time, or do I just give myself over to the story, write it organically again, and hope that those twists just naturally occur. I don't know. I'll figure it out as I go, I suppose.
I suppose that's worked for you so far. But you're nearing the end of the first book in this new series, and do you feel like that those organic twists and moments are coming?
For sure. Again, this is book one in a trilogy, the Ranger Archives, and it's a different kind of storytelling, I suppose. Um, it's more like one point of view instead of several, and it's much more like one event leads to the next kind of thing because it's his journey, and that's been enjoyable to find like a new organic flow with just one character.
Hmm.
But just, yeah, they are different, but it's enjoyable in its own way.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, it's a full blown publishing career now. I mean, what's been the since you began? If you can cast your mind back to day one, book one, to now, what do you think's been the biggest like eye opening experience of it? Like the thing, something that you maybe didn't expect to happen or to understand. Like what's kind of taking you by surprise about the whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, easily the one standout moment would be May 2017. It's not hard to recall it actually. Um, I had prior to releasing Rise of the Ranger, which is book one in the Echo Saga, I had released two other books in a sci-fi series, and they were out there. They weren't doing too bad. It wasn't They weren't doing well enough that I could stop being a nurse and transition to full time writing. They were just ticking away very slowly in the background, and then I was probably, I think, by that point, that I'd released two books. You release your books that you've spent a long time, pouring yourself into, and then nothing happens. And I was a bit disheartened. And I think, I was sat there one night and I had Rise of the Ranger and I had a cover and a blurb, and I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even tell my wife. I just published it on Amazon. Just left it.
Yep.
And I
Yep.
remember thinking to myself, "Oh, I'll check back in on that in a year, and maybe it'll have sold a few copies." Trying to like keep my expectations as low as possible.
Yep.
And by the end of the month, it was in like the top 500 bestsellers in America. And
In
uh,
in the store? Yep.
yeah, yeah,
Really? I didn't realize
yeah,
it got so high so quickly.
yeah. Its first month, and again, I have to this day, I don't know why that happened. It just did. Um, that shocked me though. Like in my whole career, that spike of just,
Yeah.
you know, I've got a couple of books out there, and suddenly it was like, oh, I've got an actual book out there. Like people are
Yes.
picking
Yeah.
this book up and reading it and enjoying it, um, and yeah, from then on, I was able to um, transfer to full time writing, and probably the first time, actually, yeah. After that, the first time I received a message from a complete stranger who found my email address through my bio page on Amazon, and sent me an email just telling me how much they loved the books. I was a bit like, you know, I couldn't believe it. Like a complete stranger taking the time to
Yeah.
reach out just to tell me they enjoyed the books. That was a great moment.
It is I am still like quite taken aback because I don't get flooded with those emails. I get more than I used to, but it's still quite something when you see refresh your inbox and there's a nice message from someone just saying how much they liked what they read. Like it is quite you go, oh, because sometimes when you just look at Amazon pages and dashboards and things, it's a lot of numbers, but you kind of forget people. In some ways, you forget people are reading it. Uh, like when I put out Unbound earlier this month, um, I had a weird moment a couple of days after it where I saw people in the Discord were talking about reading it, and I was like struck that people right now randomly over the UK and the US and wherever else were sitting down to read this thing, which kind of took me aback. I hadn't really thought about it like that. I hadn't really considered that other people were reading this.
real,
in real
real
time.
human
Like,
being.
yeah, yeah. You almost just think it's like robots downloading it or something. Like you don't on the dashboard. It's just you get that disconnect. But um, that's why I've really enjoyed setting up a Discord and these things. It keeps you more in touch with who's reading the books, which is really
Absolutely.
important.
I love chatting with like readers. We all have our love of the fantasy genre in common. It's like the one thing that like brings us all together, and we all have it in common, and it's great to chat with people about it.
Absolutely. There's a question from Vrix here about writing organically, so maybe we'll just backtrack a little bit onto that. He's asking, was there any one particular eureka moment that you can still remember that made you feel like you've got the whole book sorted now? Like one really powerful one.
Um, there was no one moment for the entire series. I think because I broke the series down into like three segments with like those time gaps in between. Probably a eureka moment in each of those three. Um, I remember writing early on the beginning of book two, and I remember distinctly the main villain of the first three books. He said something, and it was one of those moments where you're inhabiting the character's mind and you're just writing as them, without really thinking about where it's going. Said something, and I remember typing out what he said, and then sitting back and just thinking to myself, what does he mean by that? That's interesting. And then I sat there and thought about why would he say what he said, and then it came to me like what he was talking about, and that unlocked the thread that ran through the first trilogy really, um, and then had massive effects on the next six. But I remember just writing that and having no idea why that character would say what he said. I don't want to spoil anything.
No, yeah, I guess that's good. We'll keep it spoiler free, I suppose. But it sounds like it's like your subconscious is trying to tell you something. You sort of put something down, and then you have to sit and figure it out. But it does happen. Like it is a befuddling process. It it kind of scares me in some ways because I think I can, as I say, plan a lot, but then a lot of the good stuff does just come when I sit down and start doing it in some ways. And I worry that what if it just doesn't come? What if the eureka moment never comes? What if I don't get it? What if I don't figure it out? But I won't worry about that because that would be the end. But when you actually get down to writing day to day, do you have any interesting writing habits? Like any rituals that you do?
I typically can't start writing without having made a coffee. There's
Yeah,
something I
and
drink a particular coffee, and it's almost like the taste of that coffee like triggers my imagination to start working. Um, but I've got two very small children, so routine isn't exactly easy to keep a hold of. So I try not to. It's not easy to have routine, and then that routine gets kind of disturbed. So I find it easier to just let go of that, and I get my coffee down. I sit at my desk and stick my headphones on. It has to be soundtracks. I have to listen to soundtracks. I can write
yeah.
without them, but they are like fuel. Nothing with words in.
Which
Uh,
soundtracks?
Anything by Hans Zimmer. That guy is a genius. All of his albums are brilliant. I could listen to his all day. I do listen to his albums all day.
Bit of Gladiator.
The only problem I find sometimes with certain tracks is that they are so cemented in your mind as being attached to something else. Like so there are
Yeah,
some Gladiator tracks that it comes on and you can't help but think of Gladiator, which then stops me from writing a bit.
yeah.
It,
Or does it? Do you ever find like it it really like a specific track will like trigger you emotionally into that scene in that film, and then if it's perfect for the scene you're writing, it can be like, oh good, but if it's totally off key, it could almost like throw you off the scene in some ways. Like You know, like there's a series of tracks like that from Lord of the Rings or whatever, where if they come on, they would throw me off because the scene I'm writing probably isn't what that emotion from that music is reminding me of. Um,
Yeah.
so I used to
Sometimes
listen to a lot of those things, but I think a bit like you're saying, they would sort of distract a little bit. And so now I do a lot of video game music, and compilations of that stuff and lo-fi and stuff like that. Anything that's kind of music but doesn't really have too strong an emotional connection, and it can sort of fade into the background. Tend to be what I go for.
also listen to like weather sometimes, don't you?
Oh, sometimes there's like a few Skyrim tracks by like I think there's a channel called Ambient Sounds or Everness on YouTube, and they just have like 2 hour long things of like Skyrim night soundtrack overlaid with like thunderstorm from the game. So it's just like there's like rain pitting patting on the off the ground as you hear the soundtrack. So it's like another way of leveling and layering in the white noise. Um, those do work, but those do feel very sad to me. Like the night track especially feels very sad. So if I am in a chapter that feels quite poignant, sometimes I will deliberately put it on because it kind of helps set my own mood. But if it's more of a chapter, if it's an action chapter, that won't work. Like I do need something a little bouncier, or just no music. Um, so there are some tracks, and also there's some tracks where I've listened to them so much writing a certain book that it reminds me of that book. And so I do find with each book, there's usually a few that I go through a lot and listen to until I burn out on them. Then I have to find new ones because they become too associated with that project and that book. And yeah, these are very minor writing issues, but I think finding the right music to work to is important.
it, when I was doing the Echoes saga, I had specific tracks that I associated with specific characters. So if I was sitting down and starting a new point of view, I would listen to that character's track in my head first, just to like just you sort of just to submerge into their mind a bit more, and then from there. But it was like those specific tracks just kind of unlock that character's mind a bit more for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Um, I know you just were mentioning about the routine being difficult, but one thing that I do, people ask me a lot, especially now that since I've been full time, if I'm at a convention or whatever, and people learn that I'm full time, they ask about like getting the writing done. Like, what's the routine like? Especially pre going full time. It's one of the most difficult things that people find that want to write is like just settling down and getting it done. Do you have any tips from back in the day about um, how you can get the writing in, or anything that helped you?
I can't remember who the author was now, but whoever he was, I remember he quoted saying something like, um, "I can't go out and wait for inspiration to hit me. I have to be at my desk 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, so that inspiration knows where to find me." And having been a nurse in a job that was very rigid and disciplined, and you had to, it was all very like mentally disciplined. Um, that something that definitely struck me. Like being at a certain place at a certain time and doing the job, like that felt familiar to me. So that was what I
Mhm.
tried at the beginning, and it really worked. Just sitting myself down in my environment with my music and my coffee and my Mac, and saying to myself, okay, before I had kids, Monday to Friday, it would be just get 2,000 words done a day, Monday to Friday. That's when your 2,000th word is written. And that was, so in my head, I was like, that's 10,000 words a week, 40,000 words a month. I could get 2 books out a year maybe on that. And it worked. Now, now I tend to do 3,000 words a day on 3 days, and
Right.
then make up the extra 1,000 across the week.
Somewhat.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I think for me, 10,000 words a week is that sweet spot where where the quantity is good and the quality is good.
I think I have really bursty periods where like little gets done, and then I'll have like 2 really intensive weeks where suddenly like 30,000 words comes out, and then I slow down again. Sort of, and I'd like to get a little more even like that. I would. I think it comes into that because I constantly revisit my plan and go back and forth and edit all the time. I think that's where the burstiness comes from. But certainly, smoothing it out and being predictable would be something that I'm trying to push towards.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, it sounds quite boring, doesn't it? Be at your desk, do your job. Like that sounds kind of boring. You think being an author, it's like, oh, I'll go out for a walk and see the trees and whatnot, and I'll see,
smell the flowers.
yeah, and watch the people, and it'll all come
Yeah,
to me. But actually, that's just procrastination. Sitting down at your
it
desk,
often is just procrastination.
yeah. Which,
Yeah.
to be fair, these days I do say that that's part of the process. um, but there is something to be said about just sitting down with just you and your imagination and just getting those words out, because the first draft, those first words that you write, they can be changed, you can do anything with them. The important thing is to get the words out and get that story moving.
Yeah. I think there's something, a lot to be said for just mentally, your brain just seems to like to know that it's in this certain space. It's like, okay, I'm at this desk, this computer, this setup. This means we're writing now, and it just sort of learns to slide into that. Um, y- you know, it sets yourself up. I mean, I will say though, when I'm stuck, sometimes I go out for a walk, and sometimes that does help.
Yeah, oh yeah, if you get stuck, there are a number of different things you can do. I mean, I got stuck writing the second book in my first series, the Terran Cycle, and to to try and get past that block, ended up writing Rise of the Ranger. uh, sometimes the best thing you can do is just write something completely different to just to keep the wheels greased.
Yeah. And so that you take weekends off then. So you've got this amazing routine now where you can get your 10,000 words a week done, and you take the weekends off, and you don't feel stressed about writing. Okay, that's the magic spot. That's where I'm going to be working towards.
So
Because I
what? Oh
do
yeah,
try.
work like 7 days a week, something stupid, didn't you? You just don't seem to take a day off.
Yes, well, um, I think most people here know I'm involved with a publishing company called Portal Books as one of its founders, and so I have taken a step back this year, partially because I was completely burning candle out at both ends. That's helped to take a little bit of a step back from there, and so I'm not going as full tilt as I was. But yeah, for a while there, it was 24/7 essentially, because I was trying to do two really time intensive jobs. I'm hoping now that yeah, I can take like at least one day off completely, and hopefully the weekends total, at least not writing. Maybe other things have to get done, but I would. I'm moving towards what you have here. I am aiming for the 5 days a week, 10,000 words. Yeah,
It can
much more
really help
professional.
to take a couple of days off, because I will often find that even if I don't want to stop writing on the Friday, I take a couple of days off, and come Monday, I'm eager to write, and I will often it's almost like a build up in your head, and
Mhm.
you start writing and you get
Yeah,
loads. It seems to flow better almost.
interesting. I just get a bit anxious when I'm in a first draft. Um, I almost get a little anxious if I haven't written that day because I think I feel guilty. But on top of that, momentum for me seems to be very important. So sometimes if I do take a day off, it's almost harder to restart a chapter again or something because I don't know. But if I keep going, if I just keep going, I get these rev moments, like I say, where like there'll be like a 2 week period where I'm insanely productive, but it does taper off, so it kind of evens out. But if it was smooth all the way through, I'd probably feel better. But if I break it up too much, or I found if I broke it up too much, I would completely lose my momentum. Um, but I'm trying to work on that. It's not healthy. You can't go flat out all the time. As you say, you need to let your brain sit and rest and let the imagination well build up again before you start mining it or taking the buckets out
Your
of it, whatever.
routine, your routine reminds me of when I was writing when I was working as a nurse. You know,
Mm.
and you'll probably remember that as well when you've got a full-time 37, 40 hour a week job, and then and all that you're also writing in every minute you've got. I remember that. I remember my wife saying like, "Oh, let's go out and do this thing," and I'd be like, well, I'm work tomorrow, so I've only got like today, so I'm just
Today.
gonna write."
Yeah, I worry that that's been a lingering mindset for perhaps too long. That will change. Um, so if you could go back now, Phil, all the way back to day one, not even of Echoes, but day one of the sci-fi series, like right back, and give your past self one piece of advice about this whole thing, what would it be?
um, One, Phil, I would tell him to not worry about where it's going, um, because I planned out every chapter of those 4 books in the sci-fi series because um, I did I didn't trust myself to be able to write the series with like actual conclusions and things happening in it. Whereas I think now my number one piece of advice to day one, Phil, would be to trust your imagination. Yeah, because that's what I do now. Like that's the whole organic writer thing is to simply trust your imagination. Like and it's easier to do once you've got like now I've got the Echo Saga behind me. I can sort of say, oh, it's fine. I'll just trust my imagination to do it because it has done it already. But back then, yeah, I remember finishing book one, just being like, I don't know what I'm doing now. I don't know where I'm going, and that panic made me plan everything. When actually, it's far more enjoyable to just throw yourself into the adventure.
Right, so I think we can sum that up as trust your gut. That'd be fair.
Yeah,
I think actually it is the thing that people want to try and hold. Like if when you'll be writing something, you'll feel when it's ready. You'll feel when you've got it there. And if something's holding you back, some gut instinct saying it's not quite there, it's not quite there. It's worth listening to that, and then improve it. Or you'll if you're writing something that doesn't feel right, it might be that you've gone in the wrong direction. Like those gut instincts are very very handy, very good compasses to follow in a lot of this actually. Because a lot of it is hard to describe. As we say, we sit here and we try to describe how it works, but a lot of it's just instinct and some subconscious activity, and then we try to piece it all together like at the end, like imperfect, perfect artists that we are. Uh,
I used to write
okay,
and tell myself, write like no one's going to read it. So that worked for a long time, writing like no one was going to read it. It's very different now that I know I have a readership that's ready to buy my next book and are eager
yeah.
to know what the next story is. It's hard to write like no one's going to read it when you know they are.
Do you think that's affected how you write or what you write? Like, do you think it's affected or changed what you do in some way?
It doesn't affect how I write or what I write. It's only affected my mental health. It hasn't affected the way I write because I can only write one way and I can only tell the story I've got in my head. That's all I can do. It just, I now definitely feel more pressure and apprehensive when I'm about to release a book. It's like when you
Yeah.
lock the book in on Amazon
Mm.
and you've got those 3 or 4 days where they have the book, you can't touch it. It's then going to come out. For those few days where I can't touch it, I have all my doubts and things, and I think how many people are about to read it on day one, and I don't know what they're going to think. Whereas I used to just publish a book and just move straight on to the next one.
Yeah, I think that the the pressure of knowing people are going to be grabbing it straight away is it's a different sort of pressure. Like even when I wrote Ascendant, that was book one of a new series, so I wasn't being totally fresh, but it was a new thing, completely new, unrelated to my first series. And so there was that element of I'm just going to write this, I'm going to make it. as good as I can, and I'm going to make it the kind of book that I really want to read. And off it goes. And then once it's kind of off, I think you'd be lying if you didn't say you took some influences from what reviewers are saying, what the readers are saying. When people email you and they say, I really love the book, they'll often mention a certain part that they liked or disliked. Like, you do build up a bank of that in your head and you think, oh, maybe I shouldn't kill that person or whatever it might be. Like, I think it does affect just a little bit because you don't want people to dislike it. The pressure becomes like, I've now got to give, I want to give everyone that picked up that first book and liked it an enjoyable second book, or just as good. And you've got to follow up. It's a different sort of pressure. I was feeling it. I was feeling it earlier in the year. Once I got the draft together, I felt quite good, but really intense around March this year. Like I was worried. Thankfully, I figured it out. I had my eureka moments, but for a while there, yeah, I was thinking, oh no, they're not going to like it.
Um, you know, when you receive the cover and you see the cover for the first time,
Yeah,
does that not like do something for you in terms of like encouragement? How do you feel when you get the cover?
yeah, it starts to feel real then when I get the cover, um, and it 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 feels more real, and then it kind of I don't know, like I think this time when I saw the Unbound cover, I was like, okay, that's really good. Okay, I need to like now deliver this on time now because I'm going to reveal it. It's going to become very like I'm in stone now. I can't be in like the draft mode forever. It actually did it kind of lit a fire under me a little bit. I think it sharpened my focus on it a little bit, and I think I did have a final 2 months after the cover was done where I kind of stormed through much better than I was doing. So yeah, it kind of had a lot of emotions with it, but I think it actually did help me to focus up and finish because it sort of felt like if I want to put this out there and be like, oh, here's the cover, guys, I really better start making a plan to release it. And before it used to be the cover came quite late in the process. I think with Ascendant, the cover came as I was doing my final editing passes.
Oh,
So
wow.
like the book was basically done, and then we were getting the cover ready. Whereas this time I tried to do things in advance more, so it was a little different. But saying it let a fire under me is quite true, and actually, probably a good idea to go get book three's cover done at some point soon. Makes you think about the story too, right? You have to give the designer a brief. You have to tell them what you're going to put on it. That makes you think what's a key moment or what's a key character or what's going to be important for this book, and then it can help you solidify the book in your head. I think.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I always get really excited when I see the cover. I immediately want to start writing. And like you said, it does sort of make it more real in your head that you're writing a book. Because it's just a lot of words on a page, isn't it? Like for the majority of the process, and then when you see the cover, it's like the other half of the book kind of thing. You know, it's that gateway into the book. I just get really excited, and I'm just like, yep, get me back to my keyboards. I need to just like
Finish this now.
I need to
Yeah,
bring this image to life now in book form.
absolutely, absolutely. I see there's a couple of questions. I think one of them is quite specific to echoes. So forgive me if I'm butchering names here. Question from Vrix, which is to say, Vigon. Is that a name?
Vigor, that's really good.
Vigon. Vigon.
That's really good.
Okay.
A lot of people get that first time.
Vigon. Vigon is such a deep character with a lot of surprises and twists and a huge character development from start to finish. How did the inspiration from him come about?
He started out as an audience character. In case you've never heard of one of those before, um, those are characters that work really well in speaking for the reader. So they will be characters who often don't know everything, haven't seen everything, and they ask a lot of questions. And
Okay.
It's a really good way of organically getting information across to the reader without just dumping a paragraph of information on them. And that was basically him. He started out as this still quite an interesting guy, but we didn't know much about him. He was with a more interesting and main character, like they were a pair together. They went everywhere together, and I like a lot of the book. I had no idea where he was going, what he was doing. I just knew that because he came into the book in book 4, so it was after a big time jump, and things in the world had changed a little bit from the first 3 books, and I needed him to be able to ask a few questions of the more main character, and then they get split up, and I decided to follow him. You know, instead of just following what felt like a very important character, I actually followed Vigon on his journey where he went, and he just kind of snowballed. You know, if you've read the series, you know, like what happens to him, like what he becomes and things. And I didn't realize that until the very end of book 4 when he was giving like this really great, you know, pre-battle speech. And that was one of those eureka moments where for the entire book, he had just been a big question mark to me. I didn't know exactly who he was or his past. That kind of evolved. But then I hit that point and stopped writing again and sat back and went, yes!
uh, those are the moments.
I love,
Character stuff is the stuff that does come the most organically for me. I think I can plan that as much as I feel like, but it won't matter. It will change. It will change. You'll get those moments for sure, especially when you're doing dialogue. Don't know about you, but I find doing the dialogue really solidifies characters sometimes, or sometimes they will just, as you say, come out with some random statement that I wasn't quite aware was going to come out of their mouths, and suddenly everything changes. It's great.
I live for those moments.
Yeah, yeah, it makes it all special. The puzzle solving, I think the high comes for me from the puzzle solving, like when I get the plot right or something. I
Yeah,
work out the magic system.
those are great. I mean, having just like written the last book in the series, I I had one of the best moments ever. I don't know about you, but I get a lot of my thinking done in the shower. Like that's just where things just come to me. You know, when you're in like you're in a place where there's no distractions and like great thoughts come to me. And I was trying to problem solve a big situation in the last book, and um, I can never fix these problems by thinking like me. I always pick a character and start thinking like them.
Right.
And I started thinking like this character, and he solved the problem because he knew something that had happened as far back as book 3 that other characters didn't exactly remember or know the details of, but he did. And because he remembered that, a thing that I wrote way back in book 3 solved a massive, big problem in book 9. And that was, for someone who doesn't plan anything, having something as far back as book 3 solve a situation in book 9, that was a great moment.
Pretty impressive. Yeah. Pretty lucky, I'd say. All the planners out there are screaming murderous thoughts. Yeah, yeah. Another this is another question, and this one from Alex. It's more of a writing question, specifically a sort of writer's question. You might give away all your secrets here, so be careful. What's your favorite way to begin a book, and how do you hook the readers right away?
Favorite way to begin a book? Um, Definitely with some, you know, intrigue is always a good start because you do need that hook right at the beginning. Um, I think one of my favorite beginning that I ever wrote was um, book 7, where I created a handful of characters that I knew from the moment I started writing them they were all disposable, which I hadn't done before. Um, they were written into. I wrote this scene specifically to highlight the bad guys that were coming into the series, and so I the point of view of these dwarves, and uh, for me, I've not done it since, but I actually found that to be a really enjoyable way to start a series by actually like giving you these characters, giving you a snapshot of them, making you like something about them,
Mhm.
and then showing you the gravity of the situation. I really enjoyed that. Although, if you look at the Echo Saga, you'll definitely see that one of the best ways that I start books is by going way back into the past.
Okay.
I, I really love writing things that happened thousands of years ago, knowing that they will affect things in the present for the characters.
Okay, so
And
almost like a kind of, I guess, like a prologue thing that you'll start each of those books with, but very specific to that book, and then it's themed because every book starts that way, and so yeah, I think that is an interesting way to do it because then everyone will come to expect that, and then you may be thinking, okay, what's the secret ancient thing going to be at the start of the next book? Yeah.
you kind of peel it back book by book. Like you get everything in right in the past, and then the book unfolds, and then you get the next book, and then you get a different thing from the past, and you kind of if you take all the prologues out, you're kind of getting a completely different story. You know, that's that that's what I love about the beginning of any book is that you get to write because I love to write prologues, and a prologue is essentially a small story um, that has a bit of a disconnect to the rest of the book. There's a thread that connects them, and that's what makes it like interesting. But I definitely love writing that short story right at the beginning that's got all the intrigue. That's what I like.
Brilliant, brilliant. Finally, okay, so one last question for you, Phil, then I'll let you go. You're writing this prequel series now with Asher, this like a sort of Rangers Chronicles. What's next after that?
After that, I am going to go back to my roots of big epic saga. I am going to write. Oh, I almost said the title. Then I'm not ready to release the series title.
Exclusive reveal.
One of those things. I think you need to see it. Do you know what I mean? Like just hearing me say the title it isn't going to make it sound great. You need to like
Right.
see the
Okay.
graphic. But it be in my head. It's kind of being 6 books, but again, we'll see. But it's going to be still set in Verda, so it's that universe, that world that my readers have come to really love. But it's going to be thousands and thousands and thousands of years into the past, so I can kind of start again without stepping on my toes, and it's going to be a whole new sprawling epic story that's got um, like every kind of creature and person and character in it that you could think of. I've been world building on that for just over a year now. Because I'm going so far in the past, I'm actually creating some new land for the map as well.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
but I'm going so far in the past, things are so different that it's kind of like starting all over again, but in the
Is it
same
so
place.
far in the past that all those mysteries and introductions to the Echoes books, all that kind of history to that series is almost irrelevant? Like it's so far back, or will it include some of that?
Going back further, going back to a time when the Dragon Riders were around, but they were young, and going back to a time where so this is just for the readers now, I suppose. Going back to a time where the Janus, they were like the first wizards, the first mages, back when they were at the height of their power, and back to the Andaran War, which no one knows about yet. I keep getting a lot of emails from people wanting to know who the Andarans are and what happened there, and I've left like little snippets in the Echo Saga, like little
Right.
bits about them, and said nothing else. But it's coming.
All will be revealed. It sounds a bit like in Star Wars they've got like the current timeline, and then there was a lot of content made in the Old Republic, which was like I think 4 or 5 thousand years before like the Star Wars that we know was set. So they just had loads of sprawling like video games and books set in that space where it was Star Wars, but it was so far in the past that it's completely removed, so it doesn't matter. You can take it completely fresh.
That comes back to that whole the familiar and the comfortable, but different.
Right? Yeah.
You know,
Hmm.
that's that's what I'm going to enjoy. That I get to do something completely new, but set in a world where everyone knows the mechanics and the names and the land and that kind of thing.
Cool. Sounds great. Well, we've been talking for about an hour. It's been great having you here. I will pop all the links both to my stuff, but especially to Phil's Amazon profile, his website, social media, all of that. I'll put in the description of the video once it goes up to YouTube. Phil, thanks very much for joining me, and thanks to everyone that was watching and asking questions. Hope you had a good time, and hopefully we can do this sometime again in the future.
That'd be. Thank you so much for having me. This has been really good.